Welcome back to our part 2 of the WWE 2K Wishlist series. Now here's another one of the big ideas. We had a big idea in the first one, even though it was taking parts of the game and just kind of enhancing it, this is going to be another one just like that. It has to do with our factions and tag teams, so let's get started. So like I said right there in the intro, we're going to be focusing on the factions and the tag teams, how those are created, and what could we do to enhance those to make the game better. Now guys, if you haven't noticed this already, we're really looking at the theme of this being, how do we make universe mode better? How do we take universe mode and make it even better? Yeah, some of it is adding back in different things, but some of it isn't. Some of it is taking the things and then like taking it to the next level. And I believed when they completely redid the WWE 2K23 game, we got a pretty bare bones game. But I think they had to strip it all back to start adding things in, and so that's what we're going to start focusing on right now. So in order to start coming up with the solutions, we need to identify some of the issues. Now, one, and kind of a big one, there's only 5 spots on a faction. So when you're creating a faction, you couldn't go through and create a faction that got as big as like the NWO. You couldn't include all of the members of DX. They had more than 5 at one time also. Then only 2 of the spots on the team are considered a tag team. That means you can't have, like, let's say Road Dogg and Triple H if you've got the 2 spots by Billy Gunn and Road Dogg set up as that tag team. They wouldn't be able to go on and compete for the tag team titles and actually win them. And there's no real cutscenes for factions. There's no promos or interviews, and the game really needs to recognize the difference between a faction and a tag team, and that is going to really play a much larger role on what we're going to be talking about on how do we come up with a fix? How do we improve the game? How do we make things better and a lot more realistic, a lot more fun, and a lot more refreshed in universe mode? So guys, these first 2 things, we're going to get into it a lot more in depth, but probably my favorite. The ability to name a faction leader. So if you had an NWO type and you had all the guys, you could name Hollywood Hogan the leader, or Jeff Jarrett the leader, or Bret Hart the leader, or however you wanted to do it. The ability to create sub-factions. So you would be able to create, let's say, the Outsiders, but make them a sub-faction of the NWO. And we'll kind of show how that works here in a little bit too. Add in faction storylines, add in tag team storylines and cutscenes. Now remember, in the first video we talked about the GM's office and adding that back in. Well, we need not just single wrestler storylines, not just single wrestler cutscenes, but actual faction. And I'm talking 5 people cutscenes, 4 people cutscenes, 3 people cutscenes, whatever it takes to make that storyline work. Allow anyone in a faction or a group, a faction group, to be a tag team. Now, what I mean by a faction group, and we'll get into this with the sub-factions, if they're in the faction or they're a sub-faction attached into that faction, that's a faction group. Any one of those members could be considered a tag team. Any one of those members then could go after the world title or the world tag team title belts, or any tag team title belts for that matter. And do not make the managers take up a faction spot. I always thought that was kind of cheesy the way they did that, where okay, yeah, we have a Rick Rude and we want to attach him to the NWO. Oh wait, now we can only have 4 members. Oh, this year's a perfect example. Eric Bischoff. What's Eric Bischoff doing taking up a spot on the faction? So make it so if one of the wrestlers has a manager attached to him, that manager will still be recognized as representing the New World Order, but they won't take up a spot. So, ability to name a faction leader, ability to create sub-factions, which we're going to I'm going to put up a screen here in just a second so we can get a little more in depth into that. Add back in faction storylines and cutscenes. Allow anyone in the faction group to compete for the tag team title. It shouldn't just be the first 2 spots that are on there competing for the tag team title. If Hogan and Savage, in the group wanted to, but we have Kevin Nash and Scott Hall taking up those first 2 spots, we shouldn't have to rearrange the entire faction just for that, and managers not taking up a faction spot. So to take a deeper dive into this, I've kind of set up a couple scenarios here. One, let's look at the NWO. They've got Hollywood Hogan, Randy Savage, Conan, Scott Norton, Buff Bagwell. They name Hollywood Hogan the leader. That's how it's going to go. But now they want to add in the outsiders. So now they add in the sub-faction now. Even though they're a tag team, they'll be considered a sub-faction of the NWO. So they can connect. They will stay that. And then when the ring announcer announces them, it will be Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, the outsiders representing the NWO. Another thing, let's look at the Wolfpack. Let's say there's the NWO, let's say there's the Wolfpack, let's say Sting is the leader. Sting, Lex Luger, Scott Steiner, Booker T, X-Pac, Wolfpack, but they're going to join the NWO. Instead of having to become a whole different thing, they're going to become now a sub-faction of the NWO. Sting will no longer be the leader. Hollywood will be the leader because that is the faction. And when they come out, they'll say Sting of the Wolfpack representing the NWO. So, a couple different ways to kind of look at it, a couple different things to do. You could add the outsiders, you could add in the Wolfpack, and you could really grow a faction. And think about how many storylines that would open up. That would open up a ton of different storylines and a ton of different things. You could then do a WCW invasion. You could say ECW. You could split them up into ECW, WWE, or the old WWF, the WCW. You could do all that and have all these different things and be able to do something like that. You could do invasion storylines. And it doesn't have to be that. It could be the bloodline. The other thing you could do, now that you've named a leader, is you would want to create some storylines where, let's say Randy Savage wants to step up and take over the control of the New World Order. There's a storyline for that. Maybe that storyline breaks off a few different ways to where Randy Savage could now challenge Hollywood for leadership of the New World Order. So, just different things that if we just add in a few of these things, because I know in the beginning you're like, oh, big ideas. Well, now this probably looks like a pretty big idea. But think of the different things and think of how much that would freshen up universe mode itself. Even if it goes into a GM mode, which we'll get into that in another video. But, so here's what we've done so far. We've talked about adding back in promos, but upgrading the ability to choose the different locations. We've talked about creating interviews and the GM office, the interaction for that, and that kind of fits in with the promos. We've talked about in this video giving the ability to name a faction leader, being able to create sub-factions, giving more storylines and cutscenes for all of those. And all of that leads into refreshing the overall version of Universe Mode. Now, what we want to do next, in our very next video, so you know what's coming up, we're going to talk a little bit on how to improve the My Faction. And not just how to improve My Faction, but that is going to kind of lead us in to the creation suites. Now, we won't really be talking a whole lot about the creation suites. We are going to focus on My Faction, but then the video after that will go right into the creation suites, and you'll see how that fits in. But guys, I really appreciate all the support that we've been getting over these last few things and on these videos. I hope that these get pushed up and out to people, and maybe somebody can hear some of these ideas and take them further than me. The WWE community, great community for the 2K sports, and appreciate everything you guys do, and we will catch all of you guys in the next one. Peace.